This is the Tom Anderson Show, broadcasting live from the KVNT studios, 7 to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday.
We were talking earlier this morning on Yelp, the review application and platform where they are funding folks to travel out of Texas, 4,000 employees, 200 in Texas, and this issue on abortion and where you have access to it or not has surfaced. And they're saying, hey, if someone needs to go through that procedure, we'll fund you because Texas and Oklahoma nearby won't allow it. Then we talked and played a clip from Fox News a segment ago talking about a possible 4-day work week. So right now on the radar with the economy as well is the dialogue on working and benefits and retirement and how much you get paid. We see unionization in Starbucks and Amazon. Economist Abby McCloskey joins us, and she is a consultant and has consulted. She was mentioning before we began Rick Perry, who I'm a great fan of, Howard Schultz of Starbucks. Speaking of Starbucks, Abby, you've been busy and you have expertise, particularly in an area of great interest to me with German European relatives and with this on the agenda now in front of American policymakers, and that is family leave. And you agreed to call into the program and talk to Alaskans and our folks online. Thank you so much for doing that. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Good morning, Tom. Good morning, Alaska. Thank you so much for having me this morning.
Absolutely. You heard me bring in and not necessarily tether the nexus of the Yelp commitment to ladies and the 4-day work week and unionization of Amazon and Starbucks. But I know as an economist, you probably had a hunch where I'm going, which is this whole category of work and getting paid and time off is on the minds of Americans and definitely on state legislators and federal lawmakers. What's your take, maybe first beginning with what is family leave and why is it important in your mind?
Yeah, so paid family leave is a topic I've been working on for the last 15 years from a center-right political perspective. And here I'm specifically talking about paid leave for moms and dads upon the birth or adoption of a child. And kind of connecting to your previous point, I think especially for people who put themselves in the pro-life camp, for conservatives, for those who talk about family values and strengthening the nuclear family, to me, this is kind of the cornerstone of any pro-family agenda. It doesn't make sense to me that we'd support kind of life in the womb, but up until the moment, you're born, and then all support drops off. And the reality is, Tom, that less than 1 in 4 parents in America has access to paid family leave. Again, that's leave that would come after having a child, when a woman is breastfeeding, when the child is completely dependent on parents for his or her care. And 40% of workers, so almost half, don't even have job protection for if they take time off following the birth of a child. And again, here we're talking about a really significant medical event for the mother. And we're talking about a really exciting change in the family dynamic. And we're also talking about an infant who's completely helpless. And, my dream and what I've been working on from the Republican side of the aisle for the last 15 years is that it should be the norm in America that parents are able to spend the early weeks, call it 2-3 months of their child's life together as a family without fearing about losing their job or without financial insecurity.
Yeah, I agree. I own an advertising agency and political consultancy, Optima, and folks know that listen to my program what I own and what I do, and that I have a small staff between 5 and 12 depending on the year and what we're doing. And then myself and my wife, and I will tell you this, and I will say it on air, that if one of my female staff was pregnant, I would certainly give them time off above and beyond, and if I had a male employee who had the same thing, I would do the same, within reason. But I know that my relatives in Germany have a couple cousins who are teachers. 2 are teachers, and one is in business, works for the transportation system, and they were bragging in a thoughtful way when they visited Alaska a couple of years ago up here in the summer for fishing. They were talking about the differences in America, and they said, you guys brag about your health care, and maybe it is better in some respects. Not smarter physicians intellectually, but just your system and this and that compared to ours. In some respects, it's not, though. And then when it comes to retirement and how we treat employees, whether it's private sector or government, we really promote and not literally promote, maybe that too, but we really embrace them and celebrate and treasure them compared to America. And I don't know if that's true or not, but what I glean from the dialogue that we had multiple times is that family leave is important to them, and it's inextricably linked to attitude and psychology and keeping families together. Would you agree with that? It makes you happier, more connected with your significant other, certainly with the infant, all those things sociologically, psychologically, emotionally. I would assume those are good things.
Sure. So as an economist, obviously, I've seen that there's an extensive amount of research about how it improves health outcomes for mothers and for children, and even improves employment outcomes over the long run and wages for women in particular, depending on the length of the leave. And, I think there's a fear among Republicans, that any type of new plan is turning us into Europe or is kind of a socialist concept. And nevertheless, though, we are the only developed country without a paid maternity leave plan specifically. And while it has been preferred by many that this would be left, as you referenced, to private sector and companies' benevolence to offer this benefit to their workers, that has not been the case in practice. And I, support limited government, but I think government should exist to protect the most vulnerable and provide a safety net. And for me, it's hard to think of someone more vulnerable than an infant. And I do feel like it's an incredible signaling device for us as a country to say we are going to protect this time with babies to be with their parents following birth. And that's why I think it should be a national federal policy and not a patchwork of systems from companies and states. Of course, companies and states could always top off a policy, but it should be a norm in our country that moms and dads and babies get to be together following birth.
Absolutely. We're talking with economist Abby McCloskey, and she has counseled presidential candidates like Governor Rick Perry of the great state of Texas, and CEO and visionary and founder of Starbucks, and who is back now in the saddle at Starbucks as unionization is occurring, much to my chagrin. I don't get that. Amazon and Starbucks, it's going to decimate them if folks get in there demanding a very exorbitant high minimum wage and other things. They're already paying enough. In my opinion, rabbit trail, different topic. But working with Howard Schultz and Rick Perry, I want to get into that with you, Abby, and not specific as much as more macro, what it's like counseling presidential candidates. Are they receptive to your expertise? I would assume they are. I also want to get into what you're seeing when it comes to family leave. Are states and policymakers receptive? What have you found about Alaska? Because you probably researched all 50. We'll come right back with Abby. Stay with us. Tom Anderson Show.
This is the Tom Anderson Show, broadcasting live from the KVNT studios, 7 to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday.
Abby McCloskey is our guest, economist and counsel to the likes of Governor Rick Perry and CEO of Starbucks Howard Schultz when they were running for president. And I want to get into a couple things. One, second, we'll get into how many states have paid family leave and what are the dimensions of that. And Abby can delineate it for all of us. And she'll also give us information how to find out more on this. If you want to be part of it, support it, call your lawmakers. But first, I want to ask some fun questions like, what's it like working with Governor Perry and Howard Schultz on the presidential campaign? Were you with them, or were you just counsel, or both?
Thanks, Tom. I was policy director to both of their campaigns, so I was leading their policy teams. And it was, it has been a joy of my career to work with both of them. They're both extremely impressive, obviously very different. And the role of the policy director and the policy team is to provide the best and most recent research on various policy reforms to the principal, so to Parry or Schultz, and then, it's politics, right? So there's a whole other part of the machine in terms of polling and strategy and having it all ladder up into a comprehensive agenda. But my role was to provide what I thought was the best possible research and recommendations for moving forward on any number of policy issues, from tax regulation to healthcare to issues like we're talking about now. How can we better support working families? So it's a lot of fun, and it's a chance to kind of get to put more into practice the stuff that we otherwise just write about in papers and op-eds and are a bit removed from.
Yeah, Rick Perry particularly, I'm just such a fan of his. I mean, he was the governor of Texas, 47th governor, and that's where you're at now. We talked off air, but I mean, he was the energy secretary, and the guy's a veteran. That's right. And I know he's been up here. I think we talked to him with his son, and he has hunted up here and fished, and he's an awesome guy. And Howard Schultz, I don't know as much, but what he did for Starbucks, considering how it started and the genesis, is just impressive. So the fact that you were connected to them, more power to you. Awesome. Let's get into the issue at hand, family leave, and looking at our great 50 states. How many, dare I ask, have adopted some level or measure or completely family leave benefits?
Sure. So in the last 20 years, we have seen states increasingly structuring policies on paid family leave and paid medical leave for the people who live in their state. And as of right now, in fact, it was just yesterday, 2 days ago, Maryland passed its policy. We have 10 states in the U.S. offer some type, and they all differ a lot, but some type of paid family and medical leave. And you know what I think is really interesting for your listeners, Tom, in Alaska and sitting here in Texas, is that all of those states are Democrat-led states, are blue states. And, what I would like to see, given the emphasis here, like in places in Texas, on family values, pro-life values, significant church-going population, that I'd like to see a red state lead on this issue. I think, again, it should be kind of squarely in conservatives' wheelhouse to, at a very minimum, protect the time, make sure that a new parent can't be fired for staying home to care for their new baby for the weeks or months following birth, but also ideally providing some type of stipend to make that possible, especially for, low middle-class families who might not have enough savings squirreled away, especially early in their career, to provide for 3 months off.
If you look at the labyrinth, and if there are 10 of them and they're all different in minutia and detail, what is the very best of these 10 blue states? What's the one where you say, wow, that, if any, that one fits my paradigm of what works for the mother, the father, whomever, whatever the scenario is? Which one would you say that's the one to emulate?
Sure. Well, as an economist, I love data, and we have the most data on California's program because that's been in place the longest. That was the first state to implement paid family leave back in 2004, and it, at the time, was a pretty modest, by which I'm saying kind of not costly, affordable policy. It was 6 weeks of paid family leave, and most of the people who took that up were new mothers, and we have about 20 years of data on how that's worked, and the reduced reliance on government assistance like food stamps, reduced debt in the family, increased financial security of these families, better health outcomes for mothers and children. We know this type of policy works. I think what's frustrating is when we're talking about reform at the national level, we're often talking about policies that are much more expansive and bigger than what California had put in place. We're talking about 12 weeks and for a wide variety of uses. We don't really know what the impact of that would be like on businesses or the labor market more broadly, but we do have a lot of data that having a relatively, 6 to 8 week paid leave plan, especially for new parents, produces a lot of really positive health, attachment, economic outcomes at a low cost to taxpayers.
Now, let's look at a private business, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here. So let's say I was going to think about maybe use the hypothetical of my business in advertising, but let's say it's a dental hygienist, and she makes, let's say, $5,000 a month, and she's in California, so she gets, based on what you just said, and you can correct me after I'm done with the hypothetical, the scenario, she would get $5,000 plus $2,500 the next month for 2 weeks, 6 weeks, $7,500. $7,500. So $7,500, and let's say typically at that dental clinic she gets a month off. And that would mean she gets $7,500 for not working, and because she's pregnant, has the kid, and then she gets, because of her agreement, her contract, she gets $5,000 and another month off. So she basically gets 6, 7, 8. She would get what? That's 10 weeks off in a year, and they have to replace her. They're not going to shut down, so they're going to have to pay someone probably a little less, instead of 10, maybe 8,000. So I mean, the really ultimately they're out just for the replacement of that hygienist, right? Because they're already going to pay her anyway if they replace someone. It's not as much as it seems, is it? It's just the replacement cost of the right. Other employee filling her shoes for that time.
Right. Well, I hope people aren't driving off the roads here with all this math in the morning.
Sorry.
But yes, the idea of having it be a government program is that it's actually really hard for small businesses to be able to pay for generous benefits like this, like to pay for someone to take 3 months off without working there, and they obviously have to pay somebody else that salary. And so that's where I think it makes a lot of sense for it to be a government program. And yes, to your point, all the government programs, they never offer 100% of your wages, right? Because then you would have an incentive just to continue to stay on paid leave for as long as you can. They always only offer, say, half or up to 3/4 of your wages, which still gives you an impetus to return back to work to get your full salary as soon as you can. So it's always a partial.
And what about someone that has a bunch of kids? What if they had 5 kids in a row? Would the private employer say, "Good Lord, I can't do this," or would you say, "Yeah"? The employer might say that, but that's very, very, very rare.
I would say that that's very, very rare. And the difference, really, Tom, and when we talk about paid leave, some people, especially on the left side of the aisle, like to wrap it up with sick leave and medical leave and caring for aging parents and caring for people who are non-related, things like that. And that all of a sudden can become extremely unwieldy on a business, right?
Sure.
Because if you're caring for an aging parent, I mean, that could happen intermittently for the next 30, or 40 years. When we're talking about giving birth, this is happening less than 2 times on average in somebody's life. There's lead time to prepare. It doesn't just come upon you, right? There's at least, 8 months of, usually of knowledge of being pregnant. Yep. This is a pretty discreet in terms of just saying it's not happening a lot. So this is something that businesses can overcome. And, kind of my retort back to that is like, do you really want to be a company that fires a woman if she doesn't come back within a week of giving birth? I mean, I think another astounding stat for your listeners is that 1 in 4 women in America return to work within 2 weeks of giving birth. Wow. And it's largely out of financial reasons.
And that's
having
too
birth
quick.
3 times myself.
Yeah. And then they're away from their infant.
Like,
I'm with you. That's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, and I'd love to get you back on in the future because I think it's critically important. And I'm one, just to speak for myself, and I know you feel the same way personally, I'm one that really puts employees and my contractors, the people that help build my business and deliver for our clients, first. And a lot of my clients are like that. I have medical clients, and I have different clients where we work with them, and they really put their employees first. And I think you have to do that. It's not always about the money. It's about getting along and delivering and being happy about it. And to have a lady give birth and then have to leave her infant within 2 weeks, that's ridiculous. So I'm with you 100%. We'll get you back in the future, Abby. How can someone help? Can they follow you on Facebook, Twitter? Can they donate? What can they do?
Sure. I mean, you can follow me on Twitter. It's McCloskey Abby, so my last name first and then my first name. But I honestly think it's calling your congressman. It's saying that people care about this. I think the primary constituency for this is young parents who maybe you can, I'm a young parent, right? You're caring for kids, you're working, you're doing school schedules, you're doing a million other things. You don't have a lot of time to lobby your congressman about what would be best for you because your hands are a bit full in the moment. And so as a result, I think sometimes it can fall down in the list of priorities. But if you can spare the 2 minutes, I would call or send a note to your congressman. There's a lot of bipartisan interest in the issue. Yep.
Well, and
especially
Senator
so that
Murkowski,
Republicans care.
Abby, Senator Murkowski, I bet it's very receptive. Our U.S. Senator, our beloved U.S. Senator Lisa Murkowski, and U.S.
Yes.
Senator Dan Sullivan's a Christian, thoughtful wife, 3 daughters. You would think they'd be receptive. We're going to fill Don Young's shoes this summer and have a re-election there for our sole congressperson. So, Abby McCloskey, it's been a pleasure. I look forward to working with Lisa to get you back. Senator McGuire, thank you for your time. We'll make a YouTube video of this. So, folks, make sure you get a hold of your federal delegation to urge this if you're not one of the 10 states. Abby, thanks for your time.
Thanks so much, Tom. You guys take care.
Absolutely. God bless the great state of Texas. Folks, stay with us. Tom Anderson Show.